How are you, everyone, and welcome to today's class. We are going to begin a journey of studying a topic that we call cell. And this is a very important topic because it has the foundation of all the biology work that you will always do in high school. So we have probably ever asked ourselves, what makes living organisms? What are living things made up of? And you have ever seen some organisms like a sunflower at this point. This is a sunflower. And you know that a sunflower grows from very small to a very large plant. Now, living organisms are made up of cells, and cells are very tiny that you cannot be able to see them, and for you to see them you need a microscope. So cells are basically the building blocks of life that we all know. They are the building blocks because we can define them also as the basic functional and structural unit. That is to mean they carry out the most important processes. The important process like growth of a living organism, like respiration to produce food. So these cells determine the name given to an organism. They determine how some organisms will be called. And according to this, we have two kinds of organisms. We have organisms that are only made by one cell, and these kind of organisms are called unicellular. And some other organisms like this particular sunflower are made up of so many cells grouped together to form one large structure, and for that reason they are called multicellular. So basically, the reason as to why cells are the building blocks of life is because that is the region where most metabolic processes takes place. And when I say metabolic process, I mean the biological chemical processes that brings about life and continuity of life. For example, a process that leads to the production of energy that you use every day called respiration takes place in the cells. So these building blocks of life also, it is also because life on earth began as a cell. Billions of years ago, only cells existed, and because of evolution, some cells formed very large multicellular organisms, while others remained unicellular. And examples of unicellular organisms are bacteria, we have viruses, we have some fungi like yeast. They are unicellular. Some of them, like you there, you are multicellular. And all these cells, they normally work to bring about a coordinated way through which life functions. Now, for us to define a cell, we have said it is the basic structural unit of a living organism, functional. And some of these functions that determine the living organisms are usually 7 in number. We have the first one, normally called movement. And movement, we also give it some different name and we call it locomotion. Now, this refers to the change in position. We have the other process called respiration. This means the chemical breakdown of food to produce energy. We have sensitivity, and it can also be given another name called irritability. So irritability or sensitivity will mean the same thing. For example, how do you detect cold and how do you respond to it? How do you detect hunger and how do you detect to it? How do some plants detect light and are able to grow towards light? We have growth, and growth is also tied with another term that we call development. And growth means permanent increase in size and mass, while for development we mean increase in complexity. To give a perspective of growth, we would think of how you were 10 years ago. You are small, but to think about development, there is a time you couldn't be able to speak fluently, but now you can speak fluently and continuously. You are developing. And as you also grow to your teenagehood, you'll become an adult. You will develop features that shows that you're maturing. For example, you will develop breasts. That is development. In reproduction, organisms are able to produce young ones of their own kind. A mango plant can produce a mango. A human can only produce a human. And this reproduction means giving rise. Remember, we should never say it is the giving birth. That is wrong. We say giving rise. Because if you look at some organisms like plants, they don't give birth, they give rise. Excretion means removal. You remove. Removal of waste, metabolic wastes. You remove them because some of them are toxic. And finally, we have nutrition that has something to do with acquiring and utilizing food. Acquiring and utilizing food. Some food are used for growth, others are used for energy production, etc. Those are just the 7 life processes that we know of. Now, we have already defined a cell, and we have seen that cells can lead to grouping of organisms into two. We have unicellular organisms and we also have multicellular organisms. Multicellular means many and unicellular means one. And these particular cells, we are going to study two kinds of cells. We are going to look at the features that are found in plants and those that are found in animals. So we have two cells in our case study today. We have an animal cell and a plant cell. Now we can see the basic differences amongst these two, but they have some common features. For example, we can be able to see that we have both cells having a nucleus, and this nucleus is found on specific places. In the plant cell, this point, it is found towards one end, but in the animal cell, it is found almost at the center. So nucleus is common in both animals and plants. The other part is cytoplasm, and the other part finally is cell membrane. Now, these are not the only parts of a cell. These are parts that are only visible when these particular cells are seen under a light microscope. Remember, we have said that cells are very small, and for us to see them, we need a light microscope, or a microscope rather. But light microscopes are not very powerful. If we use a more powerful microscope, we'll be able to see more common features. And in addition to this, Plant cells have features that are seen with a light microscope, more to which are not there in animal cells. So to have a perspective on the same, let's see how we have them. Now, from this particular page, we can see various parts that are not labeled, and we can try to label them. The very first one that is very common is our part at this particular point, the dark shaded part. This is our nucleus. And then we have another feature at this particular point here, and this part is not the cytoplasm. We call it the tonoplast. And we also have our cytoplasm at this particular point. Now, plant cells are normally different from animal cells, and plant cells will have extra features. For example, you have already seen the tonoplast, and another feature in addition to that is a cell wall. A cell wall is not the same as a cell membrane. In animal cells, we only have a cell membrane, but the cell wall is absent. In plant cells, we have a cell wall that is made up of carbohydrates. We can have other features like this particular one here, and this one we call it a chloroplast. And chloroplast is the most distinguishing feature that differentiates animals from plant cells. Chloroplast contains chlorophyll, and this makes plants to appear green, especially the leaf. Some other parts like the stems could appear green, implying that there's chlorophyll in them, and chlorophyll is normally contained in the chloroplast. So here are our parts. We have the part of the cell part, the animal, and plant. So a cell wall is not present in animals, but it is present in plants. A cell membrane is present in both. Chloroplast is only present in plants but absent in animals. The cytoplasm is present in both. The nucleus is present in both, and the vacuole is present in both, but I use the word but. In animal cells, the vacuole is usually very small and temporary, while in a plant cell, the vacuole is large and permanent. I would like to repeat that and say the vacuole in animal cell is very small and temporary. It doesn't live for a long time. But for plant cell, the vacuole is very large and also permanent. And I think from that particular point, I would like to end. Remember to subscribe and leave a comment for any question that you might have. Thank you.